And we're live. Woohoo!
Love that intro. Fantastic intro.
Yes. I need to do a new one actually because we've had quite a few guests since then.
Yeah.
But yes, I do like mucking about with video stuff. Anyway, enough about talking about me talking about myself. I'll do that for half an hour. This week, we have Craig, who is amazing. I met Craig many years ago at, I think it was New Media Europe, which was actually in the UK at British conference, but he was a European. And also I've met him a few times at Podcast Movement when I actually had a proper podcast as opposed to these live shows. Well, I suppose this is a dreadful question to start with. But can you tell us a little bit about how you ended up in Spain and how you ended up teaching Spanish people English?
Well, how I ended up here is quite boring. My parents moved here. They retired here in a similar way as in the States. Some people move down to Florida in their retirement and they get a nice house and they live there. So in a similar way, some Europeans come to the east coast of Spain. So my parents retired here with my sister, with her husband at the time. And when I'd finished traveling around and being silly in my formative years, I thought, well, it would be nice to be with the family who were now in Spain. So as an English teacher, I looked around for a job teaching English. And the closest place I could be to where my family were living at the time was here in Valencia. And I've been here ever since. And that was 1997. So I was an English teacher before I came here.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a good...
So that's the end of the interview then.
It's nice to talk to you. Bye-bye.
This is good to know because one of the ways a lot of Americans will travel is they'll go teach English in other countries. And we're talking about teaching the English language in other countries. So I have a couple of questions about that. It sounds that are you teaching the English language or are you teaching English class? So they're reading English literature or is it both combined?
And my students are adults. I don't teach children, and I'm teaching English as a second language.
Okay.
So in my case here in Spain, I'm teaching native Spanish speakers how to improve their English, which is what I do online also. But I also teach class, like real people in real classes, which is a bit strange to say that at this time. We're recording this in the pandemic. But so it's classroom teaching and it's online teaching to Spanish speakers who want to improve their English.
Okay. So what was needed to be able to do something like that? You said you were an English teacher prior to going. What kind of credentials are needed to be able to do something like this?
Well, the way I did it, there are qualifications you can obtain in the UK which enable you to teach English as a foreign language outside of the UK. So I'm not qualified to teach in the state system in the UK. That's a separate qualification. But I am qualified to teach in language academies, and there are many in the UK and abroad as well. So I can teach in any academy that teaches English as a second language. So if anyone's interested in dipping their toe in that, if you just Google ESL, English as a second language, or EFL, English as a foreign language, courses, then you'll find ways to... There are different levels. So there are basically different courses available, and then you're qualified to go away and get a job, and you get to understand the technique and what's required, get to know the grammar of your language a little bit, and then you're away.
So presumably you weren't born knowing Spanish. I'm hoping that I've got my facts right there. So correct. Did you intentionally decide you were going to learn Spanish, or did you kind of pick it up? Or was it something you did at school? I mean, how did your learning process? Because your podcast is primarily in Spanish with English bits. You're kind of talking into a Spanish audience, and then you're having saying English expressions. That's kind of my understanding. I think I tried to listen to an episode once, but it was very kind of Spanish. So
no, I'm not sure what one you picked. You must have gone back a long time, Tim. But no, it's mainly in English. With occasional support in Spanish, because we were told very early on to cut down on the amount of Spanish we were speaking in the podcast, because it was taking the students away from the language, the target language, the language they were learning. So very quickly we realized that, we'll add some Spanish when it's easier and quicker to translate a word. But usually we're speaking in English, but we're aiming it at Spanish speakers predominantly. But to answer to your question, which I've forgotten, by the way, what was it?
How did you learn Spanish?
How do I learn Spanish? I wasn't interested. I took a Spanish course before I came here for 3 months, but when I actually arrived here, I was discouraged. I found it very difficult, and I didn't really need to, because my friends were basically from the school where I taught. My work was in English. Yeah. My family were here. There's a little expat enclave not far, full of English speakers. So I didn't really need Spanish until I met my now wife. So when I met her, and she didn't speak much English, so I kind of needed to learn the language. Plus, I needed it for bureaucratic reasons and to handle the bureaucracy over here. So at some point, I said, okay, after about a year, after the honeymoon phase, I thought, well, I'd better learn this language. I'm going to settle here. This is where I'm going to make my home. So then I took courses and learned it. But it was a process. I'm still learning. I've been here over 20 years, and it's not by any means perfect. So it's a long process.
I noticed something when I've looked into teaching English abroad in Spain and beyond. And I've noticed some schools specifically look for British English versus American English. Why is that? And you can be brutally honest. Why is that?
Better for English. Yeah.
It's no big secret. Well, there are two main reasons. The first reason is I work for the British Council, which is connected to the British government, and most of the examinations they present to their customers are British-based examinations. So their course books tend to teach British English, not American English. There is an American school here in Valencia and throughout Spain, so they employ Americans because their brand of English is American English. And it's also what the customers prefer, because in Europe, they tend to move towards British English, whereas in Central and South America, the English they're learning tends to be American, North American English. So it kind of depends on geography, and it also depends on the exams that the academy offers.
Okay,
that's it. We did have one American working at the school because they really needed teachers. I think he lasted like 3 months, and then he left. I don't know if that was a cultural clash or something else, but he didn't last very long. But he was a nice guy.
He was a nice guy. It's been fun, actually, but chatting with Tim and chatting with others in England and realizing how very different our English is. So to the point of having to have these conversations, we're thinking we know what each other is talking about and realizing we actually don't. But it is our English.
You didn't know what fancy dress meant for years, did you?
I didn't. I didn't.
Another thing I bet you don't know, Christelle, a fish slice. Now, Tim knows what a fish slice is. Do you know what a fish slice is?
I don't.
What's a fish slice, Tim, in your kitchen?
I don't really know what a fish slice is. I've heard the expression, but I'm not entirely sure.
A spatula for cooking your fish, turning your fish over.
A spatula. Yeah. Fish slice. That's what I thought it was, but that's a bit obscure, isn't it?
I had no idea. I've never heard that one. No.
Yeah, they don't have fish in America. So
we have fish. We don't call ours.
It's like the tool. That's kind of what I thought. But I thought that's a bit obscure. I thought it was some sort of weird slang that I'd heard that you got from being down with the kids in Valencia or whatever. So.
No, I lived with an American guy from Detroit, from Michigan, for 3 years ago. And one day in the kitchen, I said, "Hey, Danny, pass the fish slice." He said, "What? What are you talking about, man? Fish slice? What's a fish slice?"
It's those kinds of things you don't realize until you say it. And then you just have a good laugh about it because,
But let's flip this on its head, because I've been watching lots of videos about Mexico lately, and that's because Mexico is one of the few countries in the world that's really easy to get into relatively at the moment. How different are the different variants of Spanish around the world? Because I understand like a lot of South American and Mexican types of Spanish are quite different from like European Spanish. Would you say that's equivalent kind of to the UK, US in English, or is it more distinct than that? And how intelligible are they to each other?
It's an easy way to understand it. If you think of the language, the English that's spoken and the differences between US English, American, British English, Australian English, South African English, those different variations, pronunciation differences, vocabulary differences, nuances and idioms, it's pretty much the same. And Mexican Spanish, Argentinian, Peruvian, Cuban Spanish, they all have their different features. It's basically the same language, but from the regions, and even regionally. There was a guy I met here in Spain from Birmingham. He was doing some work on my sister's house. Now, Birmingham is pretty close to London. And he came in the door and we said hello. And he said, "You're from around here?" And I didn't understand a word he was saying. And he was speaking my language. I said, "I'm sorry." He said, "You're from around here?" And I thought he said, "Do you fancy a beer?" And it was 10 o'clock in the morning. And I said, "No, I don't fancy." He said, "No, are you from around here?" And because of his accent, I didn't catch it. And it's the same language. So, yeah, there are many differences, not only vocabulary, pronunciation, and all sorts.
Yeah. Well, I know
it's weird.
Scottish people, you can't understand them if they've had a few drinks, even being an English person. So I'm sure it's probably similar. I mean, are there many Spanish-speaking people that you really struggle with? Is there an accent in Spain that's particularly hard to understand?
The Andalusian accent, which is from the south, so the Granada, Seville, that area, they sometimes miss the ends off of words, which we do too. Yeah. But they tend to not finish the words, and that's quite difficult to catch. And there's an area in the north of Spain, Galicia, the Gallegos, they have a very kind of musical, very up and down kind of accent, and they speak like this, and it's kind of hard to catch. But it's the same. Haven't you ever watched a film based in Ireland with a really broad Irish or Liverpudlian accent? And the first few minutes, your ears are adjusting to the tune, the music of the language. It's the same. When you get used to it, you can understand it. But it takes a while sometimes. Yeah. It does.
Let me ask you this. What has been your biggest challenge teaching English in Spain?
Oh, that's a good one, Christelle. Let me have a think. My biggest challenge teaching English in Spain. We want to know the truth
because so many of us want to do this. So what should we be aware of?
Well, it's not. I mean, I won't answer this personally because I was very lucky. I came to Valencia, and within a month I had a job, and I also started working online, so I had two sources of income. But for people who are not members of the EU, for example, Tim, or Christelle,
most of our viewers now probably.
You would need like to come over here and kind of have a job before you came over, pretty much, because it's very difficult for an academy to employ you as a teacher because of all the permissions and the visas and the work permits and so forth. So what I tend to suggest to people who want to do that is, first of all, get in contact with language schools. A good time to do that is towards the end of the summer, because many teachers leave at the beginning of the summer or during the summer, and the academic year begins in September. So a good time to start looking for jobs is July and August online. But I also think these days having a good online presence, I mean, if you haven't got a website, set up your website, do some teaching with Zoom on platforms like italki, for example, and that will give you some experience. And you could do a hybrid thing, because it's a bit dubious at the moment of whether we can do classroom teaching, and students are a bit nervous and anxious about coming into class. It's probably a good idea to have that hybrid approach and do some online teaching and then look for a job in the classroom as well.
Okay.
But it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
Yeah. What specifically to you then was your biggest challenge to overcome, or have you found over the years?
My biggest challenge has been more online than teaching in the class. I mean, I don't do many contact hours with the students, and that's been pretty constant for over 20 years now. And the examining I do for Cambridge as well, that's been fairly constant. The problem I've had really is online, because we set up a website. We had some success selling online courses by CD-ROMs. Do you remember those? Posting CD-ROMs. We did that for a few years.
Yeah.
Now we sell downloads, but Google, we gave lots of free stuff away, and we were earning money from Google ad clicks. But of course, over the years, that income's gone down, and there's more competition out there. So it's been challenging and also very interesting to see how teachers like myself can make money online. And now it's getting quite a crowded space, because a lot of teachers aren't able to teach in the classroom worldwide. So they're going on YouTube, they're going on social media, they're putting themselves out there, they're creating websites. So there's this influx of teachers now online because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that occupies me most at the moment, is thinking how to position myself as an online teacher, and how to keep the kind of income streams coming in, because although we give loads of stuff away free, we have to pay the bills as well.
Yes.
So it's balancing that's difficult at the moment.
I've got a stupid question, as I often have.
Oh, I love stupid questions. Go ahead, Tim.
Well, it's probably not stupid, but when you're teaching like foreign online language skills online, say, do you actually have to know their language, or could you get away with just speaking English and being like an English teacher? So if like somebody from Thailand they spoke a tiny amount of English and they wanted you to teach them English. I mean, are there online English teachers who don't speak the languages of the people that they are teaching English?
Absolutely, yeah. The multilingual classes are very challenging to teach, but they're a lot of fun. You get students with all different pronunciation difficulties and all kinds of difficulties. Someone from Thailand won't have our alphabet, so it's even more difficult when you're teaching them writing. But it can be pretty difficult. But I don't tend to teach lower levels. I tend to teach intermediate and above. But the way you do it is you go very slowly. You use good materials, good textbooks, lots of repetition. You model the language. They repeat after you. You put a context there so that they can see that you're saying nice to meet you, or this is a pen, for example. Yeah. What is this? So very basic language you can teach, but it goes very slowly. There's lots of repetition, and you use a good course book material and teach from that. But yeah, definitely without using their language, of course. Yeah.
Let's talk about
Christo. It's better if you don't, because as soon as you use their language, they tend to fall back on that.
Yeah.
So it's better if you don't let them know you can speak their language if you can.
Yeah. Let's talk about your podcast. I'm very curious about your podcast. Why did you start it, and what do you focus on? Obviously, English is a second language, but tell us about that.
It started, if you think about it, if you're learning a language, you need to hear it. So the website I started back in, my business partner, Lewis, he started it. And I came on board with him as a partner in 2001. And we started embedding sound files in HTML so that they could hear the language. And eventually, as I became interested in podcasting, it was a no-brainer to think, well, we should have a podcast. So for 2 or 3 years, it was absolutely terrible, because it was just me basically reading a newsletter so that they could have an audio model of the language. There was nothing interesting in it. It wasn't entertaining. It was terrible. That was in 2010. And then about 3 years later, a good friend of mine, Reza, who works with me in the British Council, he came on board. I said, come and do the podcast with me. And then I realized that I'm not a solo podcaster. I'm good with a co-host. So since he came on board in 2013, it really started picking up numbers and became popular. And it's been growing since then. So really, it's because of him that it's as successful as it is.
So do you interview guests? Is it a conversation between each other?
I used to interview as well as doing it with him. Then I stopped. Although strangely, last week I did have a kind of a swap cast with another successful podcaster. So we had a chat together and published it on our separate feeds. But no, on a weekly basis, it's myself, it's Reza with feedback from the audience, either answering a question they've posed or speaking on a topic they've suggested. So the material and the topics tend to come from the audience, and we play their sound files and help them with their English and help them to improve. So we're basically speaking on a theme that's been presented by the audience.
Yeah. I was thinking basically from a exposure for your podcast point of view, this is possibly the worst show. You really want a Spanish show to be interviewed on, don't you? So
I'm here for you guys. I love this stuff.
I'm not sure that's why. We want to know how we get to teach English overseas.
It's easy. You come to visit me. You stay in my. Well, actually, I invited you to stay during COVID. It's not the best idea, but you come over here and we go out and have a nice paella together, and I'll introduce you to some people, and you start teaching. No problem.
Yeah. Well, I did put, because I copied it from a different interview that you did recently about COVID and Brexit. So how has Spain been affected? I mean, I know that it's probably more like the UK, as in lots of lockdowns, but how has COVID been for you in Valencia? And has Valencia been any better or worse than anywhere else in Spain?
Strangely, I was when it broke out, which was March last year, I was in Orlando at Podfest Expo.
Oh, yeah.
But you couldn't make it, Tim. I remember we spoke about this online, but it was kind of breaking out while I was over there. And I was very lucky to get back because later on in March, Spain had a national lockdown, the first wave, and the country pretty much closed its borders. And I just got back in after Podfest, and then we had 2 or 3 months of complete state of emergency, and you've probably heard in the news it was pretty bad. So was Italy as well at the time. And we've had waves since. So at the moment we're still in a national emergency until the 9th of May, which means curfew, which means bars and restaurants close at 6. You can't be out after 10 p.m. It's pretty strict. Everybody is wearing a mask. And luckily, where I am in Valencia province, it's the lowest in Spain at the moment. So we're doing well. We're doing okay. I've had my first jab. My wife had hers yesterday.
Okay.
So, you know, they're getting the vaccination program activated, but it's been weird. I mean, it's just been crazy. I think some good's come out of it, but unfortunately it's been mostly bad. On the positive side, though, I don't know about you guys, but it's given me a lot of time to reflect on things, on life, on what I do, on prioritizing. It's so much time to think, and that's been positive, I think. Has that been the case for you?
You're going to join the circus now, then, or something like that. That's a revelation. You can't.
I don't think they'd have me, Tim. I can't. I've got no talent, mate.
It has. You know, we've talked to quite a few people about this exact topic, and I think a lot of us are realizing, okay, what really matters?
Yeah.
You know, exactly. What is it that matters? And I'm curious, how does this change your life in Spain or teaching English? I mean, how does all of this change when you start to go back and reflect?
Well, it's accelerated my kind of plan. I mean, we don't have kids. So from that aspect, we're fairly independent. And what I'd love to do, because we both love traveling, is to be not location dependent. So to be able to work anywhere. Now, I can't do that at the moment because I'm tied to the school. So the idea is to ramp up a bit the online teaching and get it to a point where I can take my laptop and work pretty much anywhere, so that when we can travel again, then we're not tied to being here in Valencia. That's the idea. And that's become more important to me during the pandemic, also because we've missed traveling so much, because we haven't been anywhere for over a year. Now, I know this sounds a little bit oh, it's all right for Craig, because I know people have lost their jobs. They've had family problems. There's been a lot of fallout as a result of the pandemic, and a lot of people are in very, very dire circumstances. But from a personal viewpoint, that's what it's meant to me, just giving me the space to think to the future and what I want to do going forward.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people are going to be much more mobile. I mean, it's something that's come to my mind. I think Christelle, you're in a similar position. I mean, a lot of people are like, why are we where we are? And it's a big question that a lot of people have asked.
Absolutely. I know Tim and I have conversations through DMs back and forth. Have you considered Thailand? Have you considered Mexico?
Have you considered Vietnam? I mean, there's lots of countries in the world that are surprisingly easy for people to go and work, and I mean, not so much. The US used to be very easy to go and work in, but now it's like made it very difficult. And the UK, God only knows what the UK is going to do immigration wise over the next couple of years. Anyway, on that note, we put Brexit in the show description. So presumably you've now got some sort of Spanish residency that means that you aren't going to get kicked out. Because I think, isn't it like British people can say they could stay for like 3 months every 6 months or something now in Spain? They can't stay continuously anymore.
That's correct. As a tourist, yeah. But I've had residency for a number of years. But recently they introduced a new card, which is nice because it's actually got a little photo of me on it. So they can see who I am now. It's not just a piece of A4. So we've got this new residency permit that I've got, which entitles me to permanent residency, plus the fact I'm married to a Spanish national, plus the fact I've been paying tax here for 20 years. I own property here. My family live here. There's absolutely no reason for me to go back to the UK. Yeah. So for all intents and purposes, I'm here now, and I don't think the SWAT team will be coming to my door to kick me out anytime soon. Although I might have problems going back to the UK because I'd be an alien, wouldn't I?
Well, you still got British citizenship, haven't you? Or you given that up? Or?
Oh, sorry. I mean, coming back from coming back from Britain to Spain. Coming back into Europe from the UK, I might have problems. Well, not problems, but I'd join a different line, wouldn't I?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's we're not in the EU line anymore coming in, so
yeah.
But no, I mean, it hasn't affected me, to answer your question. I mean, it's just carrying on as normal. As far as Brexit's concerned.
Have you met the English-speaking teachers that are American? Do you have any relationships with them at the other school?
No, apart from that guy who worked where I work a few years ago. I know there are American teachers here. Okay. I met a guy from Bilbao in the north of Spain who's from the States, and he was doing a lot of online teaching for the reasons I said earlier. He found it difficult to get into an academy as an American because it's not easy to get a work visa.
Yeah.
The way around that is there's a couple of ways around that. You could apply before you come here, so the company you will be working for will get you your work papers organized before you arrive. You could work illegally cash in hand and be a tourist here and just get paid for private lessons, or teach online inside Spain with a good internet connection and working on a platform that employs teachers. You won't become very rich doing that, but you'd be able to pay your rent.
I find this fascinating. I find it absolutely fascinating. But as it becomes harder for people in the UK and Americans to travel elsewhere and be allowed in, I keep asking these questions. So we're very curious.
Well, I think the world will open up. So
it's going to take some time, Christelle. I mean, I'd wipe out this year, to be honest. I don't think until they start getting up to 75% of the population's vaccinated. Then I certainly won't be traveling anywhere until it's a lot safer.
But I'm still hopeful I'm going to get travel in August to the US, but it's still fingers crossed. I had my first vaccination last week, but we have an enormous gap in the UK between the first and second jab.
Wow.
So it's kind of end of June, my second one, hopefully. So
We're being really strict here in America. Once you get your first shot, they schedule you immediately for your second shot. So you're getting depending on the brand, you're getting your shot within 3 or 4 weeks.
That's excellent.
Yeah, so they're not doing this 3-month waiting time that they're doing in the UK, which I find quite odd. So I've already had both my shots because I teach, and we were in the top, I think the second tier of people who could get their shots.
What do you teach, Christelle? Do you teach English?
I'm in the kindergarten classroom.
Okay.
So I've always taught early childhood education or nonprofit early childhood education.
Right.
So, yeah.
So that's a different kettle of fish to adult teaching English, which was what I was thinking. So as a young learner teacher, you'll have more opportunities, and there's more work as a young learner teacher than there is as an adult language teacher.
Okay. That's good to know.
Yes.
Okay. We're gonna.
You two sound like you need a career advice call.
Actually, I brought you here.
I'm sure Craig will probably charge you.
If I hear of any openings, I will let you know.
So I was going to end on a positive note, unless Christelle's got any follow-up questions.
I mean, I really thought that was positive, Tim.
Well, no, but much more kind of like following on from earlier. You said you wanted to be like location independent. Where are you looking forward to going and trying to be location independent in the world? I mean, I presume you're not just moving to Madrid or somewhere and then saying, look, we're location independent.
Anywhere I haven't been before. As I said, we love traveling. We go to really unusual, strange places. Before the pandemic, we took a ferry up the east coast of Greenland to see where the ice breaks off, and it was a local ferry. So it stopped off at different places, and you got to know how people lived and traveled. And it was a time when the kids were going back to college. It was a lovely experience, and it was kind of an out of the way place that not many tourists go to. That's the kind of thing we like to do. So I mean, there's so many places, just everywhere, really. Just not to have to travel with one eye on the calendar and say, okay, I've got to be back to teach class on such and such a date. It would be nice to just go and say, well, we'll come back when we're fed up. We'll come back when we've had enough traveling. Let's just go away and enjoy ourselves. So hopefully, once this pandemic's over, we'll start thinking about it.
Absolutely. Craig, thank you so much for being here and chatting with us. It's been fascinating to learn about what you do and kind of explore and realize that we all are kind of reflecting now in this time and in this pandemic. But there's hope. We're getting there. We're progressing towards hope and being able to travel again and do the things that we want to do. So thank you for being here. It's been amazing.
You guys. Been a lot of fun.
Thanks to all the viewers who seem to have disappeared at the moment. But there were some viewers. There was a big surge in the middle. And I think we started talking about Brexit and everybody left. So,
sorry about that. It was probably me they ran away from. I have that effect on people.
So thanks to everybody.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.
This is terrifying for me.
I've made more money in the last 3 years than I did in the previous 7.
It's cliche shit, you know.